Hi, I'm Paul, the Happy Gilder. Welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be recreating a classic piece, and that is the Rawson & Evans Labelle Supreme sign. Now, a lot of the processes in making this sign have been covered, but there are differences when it comes to making a much larger panel. Up till now, a lot of the things I've been making have been standard 8x10, but this is going to be a lot bigger, much more of a kind of statement piece. And the main reason I want to do that is to kind of change the tone a little bit in terms of how we look at what we're doing. So what we just need to remember sometimes is that reverse glass art is actually an endangered craft. It's on the red list of endangered crafts with the Heritage Trust, so I'm going to put a link to that in the description so you can check it out. So it's easy to think when we're making kind of small quirky panels that they're just nice keepsakes, but in reality there aren't many people in the world who do this, and we're using precious metals, Victorian techniques to create potentially things that are going to be the antiques of tomorrow. And I think making a great big piece like this, such a classic as well, really sort of puts that message across that although this is a fun hobby, this is also a real craft that not a lot of people can do. So anyway, I hope that didn't come across too cheesy. But anyway, if that is the sort of thing you're into, Victorian techniques, gold leaf, glass art, then you're in the right place, because that's all this channel's about, and I normally release a video every week. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, I'll put a link to my Patreon in the description, and I reward my patrons with a different vector design every month. There's also a link to my Instagram, my Etsy shop, and the Happy Gilder Facebook group, which I think now has got about 160 people all helping each other out and posting pictures of their works. Really good place to be. But that out of the way, let's crack on. Okay, so I'll start the process in Vinyl Master. And the reason I'm not starting it in Photoshop is it's not my design. So I'm just going to import this into Vinyl Master and convert it. So I know from checking it that the size of the canvas was 70 by 51 centimeters. So I'm going to type that in here. Ooh, wrong way around. And then just import the file in to vectorize it. This is the one that I'm going for. So this is just a solid black and white JPEG. Doesn't matter if it's grayscale or RGB, it'll all work the same. So now that that's in, I'm just going to click the vectorize button. And this just brings up a problem that you might encounter sometimes in Vinyl Master, and it's that whatever colour is selected, it isn't actually showing any part of that design. And there's a simple fix for this, and it's just that you add another colour here. So if I click that, and now you can see it's recognised it, so we can use the colour that it's recognised. So I'm going to turn these two off, and then I'm just going to double click on this and change it to black. And that's how I want it. So I can click trace. This is also something that's common that happens in Vinyl Master, is it looks like it's crashed. It hasn't. If you just leave it, it will do its vectorizing, but sometimes it just doesn't do it in the smooth mode where you can see it appearing like it's starting to do now. And that's done. So I'm just going to accept that. Then I'm going to go to File, Cut, and Send to Cutter. Now we can see that this is too big for my vinyl cutter, so what you have to do there is rotate it. We've got mirror selected because I'm going to be applying this to the back of the mirror to sandblast away, so I want this done so that it's in reverse. And that's it. So now I can just go to Cut and send that to the vinyl cutter. Right, so now I need to apply the design to the back of the mirror. Now I've covered this process before in some other videos, but we've only ever done that on small pieces, and this is quite big. So there are a few other things to take into account, but we'll go through them as we go. The application tape I've got is the same one I use for anything. It's, I think, 30 centimetres, and even though this piece is 50 centimetres, I much prefer doing it in two rather than with one giant piece of application tape. You can get that. But I just don't get as much use out of a roll that big because I tend to make smaller pieces. But it all depends on what you're going to use it for. So firstly, what I want to do is just make sure that the starting point of where we apply the application tape is nice and flat. So I just put something on it and that holds that edge down. I'm also going to take this to the worktop. And that's because this worktop doesn't really hold the application tape very well. As you go in, it doesn't stick to it, and then that can become problematic if you're kind of trying to slide it on with the squeegee and the piece is just sliding around. Just another thing, beforehand, always wipe down your surfaces, because if you're using your squeegee to go along and there's just a little bit of grit, even a bit of sugar under there, and you hit that, you're going to just end up with dents through your vinyl, and it's just best to give a surface a wipe down before. So, firstly, just going to get a bit of sellotape and tape that edge down. And I'll still use this to move along as I kind of lay the application tape down, just because this has been sat on a roll, so it will sort of tend to sort of spring up a little bit. So, get started. So the more space you've got, the better, especially in this case. I mean, here I've got something where I'm going to struggle to get that on, but I've done it in here for that reason. I could have done it on the dining room table, but I realised not everyone's kind of got a huge amount of space, so I wanted to kind of make it a little bit awkward for myself as well. So start by just peeling the first bit of application tape to a bit bigger than we need in terms of the length. Put that down, give it a bit of a rub with your hands, and then start going on with the squeegee. And it's exactly the same motion as I've done in the other videos, so you're kind of doing like a sort of inch at a time as you sort of edge it onto the vinyl. Now, once you get the first bit on, I'm not going to leave this stuck down to the surface here. I'll leave the tape on at the front, but mainly because at the moment this bit is pushed down hard and this bit isn't. And when you do that, this can cause problems. It might sort of roost this up a bit and you'll end up sort of creasing your application tape, which can end up sort of creasing your vinyl. So I just pull that up and then start again from here so that this bit's a bit looser and that makes it a lot easier to apply the second bit. So, same again. So I can do this at a bit more of an angle just because I can't do it straight up because the cupboard's in the way. So, just making sure it goes on nicely. If you ever get to a point here and you think it's not going on properly, it's kind of, you know, creasing up, it's pulling the sides up and things like that, it's no problem. Just stick your knife in, snip that bit of application tape off, smooth the rest of it down, and then start with another bit. It doesn't matter if this application tape is a sort of patchwork, because, you know, the vinyl isn't our kind of feature here, it's just a stencil. Now, this bit here, where this meets, is likely going to have a kind of seam of air bubbles, but it doesn't matter. You know, we can kind of push them down and, you know, the vinyl is just a means to an end. So we can sandblast the back coating off the mirror. It doesn't really matter what it looks like. So giving that a nice firm rub to make sure that's on there properly. Pull that up. Right, the tape up. Then using the scissors can start trimming this away. Right. So got the mirror, and exactly the same as you would on a small piece, which is just peeling away a strip so that we can kind of apply this and get it in place quite easily before we commit. So just peel this away, if I can get a grip on it. Yeah. Something like that, maybe inch or so is about right. Flip that over, and then just feeling around the edge to make sure that everything's sitting flush exactly where you want it. Seems good to me, so just commit. Pull it up, and as always, not pulling it out, pulling it upwards. Halfway, and then exactly the same, probably, you know, inch at a time, something like that. A little bit of a bubble in here. It hasn't gone on perfectly, but that shouldn't matter. Then, same, not up, pulling it across. Let's kind of take this off. So you can see we've got that little air bubble here, but that's going to be fine. Not fussed about that. Okay, so here is my error. I was a bit bullish when I put the application tape on. I've made a crease in the vinyl. But that's good. I'm glad, you know, that I've come across an error, because then I can sort of show you an easy way of fixing this. So, pop the light on. Hope that's not causing glare. And all of this bit is coming out. The letters are staying. So, I'll start by getting rid of the bit I don't need and just start a little cut in here. Now, when you do this and your letters start plucking up, just hold your blade on it, and then you can just go past it and that'll be fine. So it's just that bit, and all I want to do is just sort that crease out. So just lift the letter up and slide it back down. You could do the same on the P as well. So make myself a little bit of room around that. Don't need this middle bit. So just lift that up like that, and then just firmly push it back down. Yeah, and that's absolutely fine. Got this H to do as well, so I may as well do that. Get these bits done first, because I don't want to risk the kind of vinyl losing its tack. I'll just move this around just in case I'm filming something that you can't see very well. Let's bring it down a touch. So we've got the H. Just want to get the excess stuff away from it. Use that to hold that down. And just lifting, let me just trim that away just in case it's blocking the camera. So where we've got this crease, just going in, lifting that up, and smoothing that back down. And that looks like that solved it all. I've got this sort of crease here, but I can just do that by making a very slight sort of slice in there. Just let some of that air out, and this is a bit that's going to be preserved as mirror. So what I think I'll do is just on this bit I might just put a little patchwork bit of vinyl over it. But that's the errors fixed. Now all I've got to do now is pick all of the rest of this vinyl. So what I'll do that as a time lapse so that you don't have to sit and watch that go on for the next, well, half an hour maybe. Right, so everything's picked, it's ready to be sandblasted. I'm not going to go through the equipment I use in this video because I've done one previously which goes into it in a bit more detail. So I'll put a link to that up the top here if you wanted to know how I've got this set up. What I will say, which isn't in that video though, is the abrasive I'm going to be using is 120 grit aluminium oxide. So let's just have a look in the sandblaster. Here it is, got number 6 nozzle. That's pretty much it. So let's get blasting away. Right, so after hours of sandblasting, I've now got my etched panel. It's times like this when I really do want to invest in a better compressor that can keep up with the sandblaster, but I don't make enough big panels to make it worthwhile. So anyway, enough of that. What I've got now is 2 sides of glass that need cleaning in different ways. So this side here has been etched with the aluminium oxide, and the only thing on it is aluminium oxide. So if I wipe there, you know, you can see that's going to be all over this. And because I want that glue to grip onto all of it, I can't have any loose stuff on the surface. The difficulty there is I don't want to clean this with glass cleaner because I don't want to put anything on that could, because I don't want to contaminate that surface with anything like a chemical that could potentially make it less abrasive. So I'm going to do it 2 ways. Now these things are an investment. They're the cheapest thing that you can attach to a compressor. So the air line that you have going into the compressor, just click onto that and then just blast away. A load of it. Now I won't do it all on this video, but you want to get really up close, almost like you're sandblasting it, and just keep going over and over and over. And that'll get rid of most of it. And then all I'm going to do after that is using application tape. Going to just apply application tape over it and then peel it off, and that should take off the rest of the loose sort of bits of aluminium oxide. That's all I'm going to do because I'll get the best results from chipping from that. The other side's a bit different. So let me just try and flip this over. So this is the other side, and again this is covered in aluminium oxide, but the last thing I want to do is just wipe this because it's still grit, and if you just with a dry cloth wipe that, you're going to scratch it. Although there'll be minute hairline scratches that you might not see in the right light, you will see them. So again, the first thing I'm going to do is use this, and I'm just going to blast away as much as I can, and then without touching the surface of that, I'm going to get glass cleaner and I'm going to absolutely saturate it with it. So just really overkill so it's really wet, and then just wipe and just kind of wipe that off, and that way you're not going to scratch the surface of the glass while you're wiping it. And that's how I'm going to clean both sides before applying the glue. So I'm going to get this indoors and then start mixing up the glue. Right, so everything's prepped now. So everything's prepped now, so I can start mixing the glue to start the chipping process. Now, if you've seen any of my earlier videos about glue chipping, I apply the glue from a bottle with a fine nozzle so that I can kind of control where it goes. I'm not going to do that in this case because it's a big piece, a lot of it is going to be chipped, and I want that chip to be as even as possible. And applying that with a nozzle, the fact that it kind of does go into a jelly consistency quite quickly means it's very difficult to get an even distribution when you're doing it like that. So what I'm going to do is calculate the area of this glass and do a complete pour over it to a specific depth. Now, I don't want to try and bamboozle you with a load of maths because I'm terrible at it myself. I never worked from a script, but I've had to write this down because I had to figure this out and it was a bit of a pain. Hopefully this makes sense. But the ideal chip, which I'm looking for, which is that kind of fern-like or feather-like pattern, is achieved by having a certain thickness of glue across your glass evenly. Now, I've always worked with glue chipping in the ratio of doing it by volume, not weight. But what I've found out is you can actually do it by weight and achieve the same volume. So I always go 1 part glue to 1.5 parts water by volume, not weight. Just do it by measuring it on the line and seeing, that it's about right. But it turns out that 1 part glue to 2 parts water by weight is around about the same thing. I didn't think that would be possible because the glue seems almost like crystals and water would be heavier, but I was wrong. I checked it myself and that is actually true, or it is with the pearl glue anyway. Now, here's where it gets a little bit techie, or it does for me, but ideally we want 1.5 ounces of dry glue per square foot of what we're going to be chipping. So I've measured this and I've converted it from inches into square feet, and this is 27.5 inches by 20 inches. Times those together and divide it by 144. That's what it said on the internet, and I don't know why, but well, that came out as 3.8 square feet. So having 1.5 ounces of dry glue per square foot, this works out at 5.7 ounces of dry glue that I need to do this piece. And because I can do it by 1:2 ratio of glue of weight, I know 5.7 ounces of glue, that needs to be doubled in weight for the water. I hope that makes sense. It kind of makes sense to me now, but it was really difficult to figure out. But it makes sense to get a sort of more even chip across it, where I can sort of flood it rather than applying it with a nozzle. So what I'm going to do before that is just sort of using vinyl, make a little kind of barrier and tape it around the edges so that none of that glue overflows. I want it to kind of, sit quite evenly. So I'm just going to do that now and then start mixing the glue. Okay, so let's measure out the glue. So I've got my scales here and I know I need 5.7 ounces. So right, that looks good, and that does look about right, to be honest, because I've made this piece before and I think it was around about that amount of glue I used. So 5.7, I can go into my saucepan. So now just going to measure out the water, which is 10 point, oh man, 10, no, 5.7 times 2, 11.4. Oh, hang on. Yeah, 11.4. Right. Took me so long, the scales went off. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, cool. And all I'm going to do now is leave that for 45 minutes and agitate it every 5 minutes. So I'll just use like one of these long sort of cocktail sticks and just give it a good stir every 5 minutes. At the moment it's just a load of glue crystals with water on top, but eventually they'll fill out and start absorbing the water. So come back in 45 minutes and then we should be able to start heating it up. Right, so on to heating up the glue. That's been sat for 45 minutes. And you can see that that glue has absorbed loads of that water. But what I want to do when I heat this up is heat it as slowly as I can and keep it on the heat for as long as I can. Now I know in some cases that's not possible. I've got an induction hob, meaning you can control the sort of low heat, but that's only recently. I used to have a gas hob, and even on the lowest heat that would kind of, if you left it, it would end up boiling the glue, so you have to just keep an eye on it, keep it on and off. The reason you want to keep it on as long as possible is these tiny little kind of glue balls need to all dissolve into liquid, and even if there's like a couple left, if you get them on your piece, they won't chip. They'll just be this gnarly little bit that is a right pain to get off. So the longer you can keep it on, the better. So I always start, because I kind of know my hob, and when it's not going to overheat, I'll put it on 4, and that won't get to the temperature where I need it to be, but it will start to let it sort of get into a liquid consistency. When that's gone into a liquid and it's been there a little while, I'll get my thermometer out, and I want to heat this to around about 45 degrees Celsius. It's really important that you don't boil this, because it will kind of mess up the sort of structure of it and it won't chip properly. So it's getting it to a liquid, keeping it at the liquid for a decent amount of time. When I say that, that can be 10 minutes, but I mean, ideally, if you've got the time and your hob will allow it, if you can leave it on for an hour, brilliant. You're not going to have any of these little sort of glue balls left in there then. But you can see already around the edges that's starting to sort of liquefy. So I'm going to just leave that going until it turns into a liquid, get my thermometer in, get it to 45 degrees, and then kind of maintain that there for a little while. So I'm going to switch the camera off now. When I come back, this will all be done, and then I can apply it to the back of the panel. Right, so the glue's ready, so I'm just going to apply it now. But before I do, just wanted to point out one more thing. I've just used a spirit level to make sure that the surface is level, because obviously I want an even spread of this glue, and that's going to be no good if there's a slight slant to the glass or the surface that it's on. So I've put a few little spacers under the corners because my worktop isn't perfectly flat. So now it's ready. I can tell it's ready because there's flies in here now, and hide glue, if you've never used it before, stinks. So I'll just get that and then just pour it on. So I want to do this as sort of quickly and evenly as possible while it's still liquid, because like I say, it does turn into a gel quite quickly. So I get a squeegee as well, just to make sure that while that's liquid I can start spreading that and it can find its own sort of surface level. Like I say, it turns to gel very quickly, so you need to get this on there and spread across. And losing a bit over the edges here, which is no good, but that's not going to stay liquid for very long, so I'm just going to pop this on here. I think I'll probably only have to hold this for a minute or two before that suddenly starts setting, but that looks good. That looks even over everything I need it on. not fussed about the edges because they're not being chipped anyway. So I'm just going to leave that set to a jelly and then come back and start trimming. That's been sat for about 20 minutes and the glue now is a sort of jelly consistency, which means I can start trimming it away. Now obviously, because there are huge areas here that I don't need to chip, like all of the border, and you can reuse glue, you just have to keep it in the fridge and that will last about 3 months. So I'm going to keep my saucepan next to me and do all the larger bits first, take them out, put them in there, and then I'm going to put them on the hob and just put it on the lowest heat just so it'll maintain a kind of liquid form, and then I can pour it into the little bottles, stick them in the fridge and then use them at a later date. So all I've got is a craft knife and the cocktail stick, and what you do is, it's really easy because the vinyl acts as a kind of guide for your knife. So if you were to watch someone do it, you'd think they might have a really steady hand, but all you do is push your blade against the edge of the vinyl and it means you can kind of cut that perfectly straight line. And then once that's cut, using your stick, you kind of just scoop this off or run it down that line. So you can see as I'm running that down there, that's sort of peeling away perfectly. And then all of this kind of huge lump of glue, don't pick it up with your hands if you don't have to. It honestly just builds up and it's horrific. You'll end up with like thick glue all over your fingers and it's a bit of a pain to get off, even with warm water, and you'll have to do that a lot. So the less you have to touch this with your hands, the better. So, but you can just scrape this away with one of these like sort of skewers and pop it back in the saucepan. And that's kind of it for the bigger bits. Well, I mean, that's the same technique you use for the smaller bits, but I'm going to do the bigger bits first, and then I'm going to do the whole thing as a time lapse as I trim it. But if I just bring my camera around here, and I can show you one of the smaller bits as well, how I do it, just so that it's not just a kind of blur of me doing something. I'm going to do the letter L, exactly the same thing. Just put your knife blade in, press it against the edge, just go around, and then with the skewer, I mean, to be honest, it's probably not set perfectly in the centre parts yet. It's only sort of set around the edge. As time goes on, and in an hour, you'll be able to just pull this out with your finger. But I just wanted to kind of show how I'm getting those intricate bits out before I put it onto a time lapse, because obviously then it's just a sort of blur of what's going on. But that's it. So now I am going to switch to a time lapse. And finish the whole thing. And I'm a glutton for punishment because the last time I did this, it took me about 7 hours to do the picking, and by the end of it I just wanted to give up. So we'll see if I've got any quicker. Right, so finished trimming all the glue. That took 5 hours and 10 minutes, and time doesn't fly when you're doing this. Firstly, because it stinks and you're basically hanging your head over something that smells like a dead animal. But also because once you've applied the glue, you are committed. You know, it's not like, say, starting a paint job and you think, I'll finish that in the morning. Once this is applied, if it goes hard, you know, that's it, it's ruined. So you've got to get all your trimming done. So I applied it, and then it's now 11:15 on a Saturday night. So it wasn't the best Saturday night I've ever had, but, you know. Anyway, so there's one more thing I've got to do, and that's just to score all of the sort of sharp corners. And the reason I'll do that is to make sure that the glue doesn't sort of curl in a way that I don't want it to and affect the lettering. So I'm just going to move the camera and show you what I mean. So all of this glue is hopefully going to contract and chip the glass. But the way it contracts is unpredictable. And so, for example, where you've got these sharp corners, let's use this end, for example. If this bit of glue cracks and then chips and comes this way, it's very likely to just pull the edge of that N right off there. You know, and that goes for anything with a sharp corner. Things like these little thin bits here should be fine because they'll chip there first and they'll come up that way. But where you've got these sort of big spaces, it's really unpredictable. So the best thing to do is kind of score any of those sharp corners, because then what that does is it kind of prompts the chip to go away from where you've scored it. So let's start, what were we, on the N? So if I just put a little score mark there at the corner of this N, that's likely to chip, splitting away like that. Now, this does mean doing it on everything, which it sounds worse than it is. It's not a big job. What I'm going to do is just put little score marks on all of these sharp corners of all of these letters, just to minimise the risk of the glue contracting and then kind of ruining it. So I'm going to do that now over everything. I won't make you watch it because it's a pretty tedious thing, and you know, you can get the picture from what I'm doing here, which is just, you know, putting these marks on every sharp corner. And then that's going to be me done for the night. So in the morning, hopefully I'll get up and this will, when you tap on it, at the moment it's quite rubbery, but if I get up in the morning and it sounds like that, then I'll put it on a heat source and then sort of speed up the chipping process. So that's me done for today. Right, it's a new day and I'm feeling all refreshed now, so let's have a look where we're at. Now this has been sat since I finished trimming it for 12 hours, and I think I applied the glue 6 hours before that, so there's my maths again, 18 hours there's been glue on this. Now if I just move my camera over here, you can see the little score marks that I made in it, and because this is a great big mass of glue, this is still quite jellyish, more so. Whereas up here, where there's not a lot of glue around it, that's quite hard, so that's firmed up. If it was just this bit, I'd put this on the heat source now. But because this is still quite jellyish, if I put that on the heat source, it's likely that that glue, before it goes hard, will go much softer, almost like a liquid again. All of these scores will meld together. There's a potential of some of this kind of glue overrunning on the vinyl. And then when it does go hard, you just, you know, you risk it sort of pulling off bits that you don't want it to. So I'm going to leave this. Hopefully by the end of today, all of these bits are firmed up. The fact that it's holding the score lines tells me that it is starting to set, you know, because if you scored and then that line vanished, it would kind of mean that it's still too liquidy. But it's getting there. So next video, I'll do a time lapse of it on the heat source and chipping. Right, this is what I use to heat my glass panels when I'm doing glue chipping, and it's an old Hostess trolley, and for something that's probably made in the 1980s, it's surprisingly economic when it comes to actual energy efficiency. So what I do is, I'll just bring this camera over here, it's only got one heat setting, and I just rest the glass on top. Inside here there's a heating element, but I don't put the glass in it because it gets too hot. if I slide this open, you can see what a mess it is. But what these used to be used for is you'd just have dishes in here and it'd keep food hot. But that heating element is enough to heat the top of this, and the sort of heat coming through is enough to make the glass chip. I put some little rubber bits on here just to make sure that you're not laying the glass face down on any of the glue that chips. This is a tip I was told by someone on Instagram, a guy called One Less Love. That's his Instagram name, and he just reached out when he saw that I was trying glue chipping and told me the hostess trolley tip, and I've used it ever since. So really good tip there. And yeah, if you can get one, I picked this up about £15 in a charity shop. So yeah, really good addition to the toolkit. Right, I've stopped the time lapse because I just wanted to say an important bit of information. Huge mistake that I've made over and over. That is, this has now been on the heat source for about 2 hours, and you can see the chipping is coming along lovely. Now when this happens, it's going to be so tempting to just pick that and pull it. Same with any of this, to kind of edge it along. Just resist the temptation. You're so likely to kind of chip away a bit that you didn't want to chip, you know, by pulling it, because the glue is contracting and it's doing it in its own way from the edges. As soon as you pull something like that L, it's going to pull across that corner and very likely just take a bit of it away. So yeah, just a bit of advice there that I've learnt the hard way, and you know, I've taken chips out of pieces where I didn't want to just because I've been impatient. This will eventually all do by itself, and if you end up a bit stuck on there after a day, rinse them off with warm water, don't pull them off. Anyway, get back to the time lapse. Right, so these are my overnight results. It's nearly all done, but there are still some bits that are stuck on. There's always a few stubborn bits, like here, I can see that, just that little bit alone, just taking ages. So I'm going to give it a few more hours. If it doesn't start to chip, those sort of areas are best to kind of just reapply the glue. It's almost like that little patch of glue just ain't playing ball. But in general, that's really nice, you know, the pattern's even and everything like that. Still don't want to kind of pull these off, you know, in case you take a bit of the edge with it. But you can, you know, tap it to kind of see which bits are loose and just stuck to vinyl, and which bits, you know, you can feel how firm they're on there to know if they're stuck to an edge, and it's not worth kind of doing anything to sort of make a mess. But yeah, pretty good. Okay, so after rinsing off the sort of bits of glue that either didn't chip or were just loose and weren't coming off naturally, this is the result of the first chip. Stand aside. I'm here because I'm hoping the light will come through. I'm not sure how well that's coming out on the camera. But overall, that's a lovely chip. There's a few areas that I'm going to do again, but in general, everything's even. There's, yeah, very little where it's taken away from the design. There might be a few tiny little nibbles out of a couple of bits, but once that leaf's on, you won't notice them at all. So let me just pop this down and I'll show you what I'm going to do. So I obviously kept some of the glue from scraping it from around the edges and put it in here, which is always handy. Firstly, because it's the same mix, so hopefully you'll get the same chip. But also it means I don't have to mix up a load more and wait around to do these little areas that aren't done. So as predicted, just move my camera. As predicted, that bit didn't chip. I said I was going to leave it on for a couple more hours, but I actually left it on for about 6 hours and that didn't go anywhere. So that bit needs doing, and zooming out, there's very little else, but there certainly are a little bit there that needs doing. So let's pop this back up here. So all I'm going to do to heat this is, I'll do it in the microwave, but I do it on defrost and make sure the lid is off. On the defrost setting, a low heat, and then just keep an eye on it. Make sure, you know, take it out every 10 seconds, swill it. It won't take long to kind of start softening up. And you can gauge it by feeling it. You know, if it's still all right to touch, but starting to get too hot, like I've said before, I think the kind of temperature of holding a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. And then that'll be fine to apply. So I'm going to just go and heat that up and then do that now. Right, so the second coat of glue chipping is done and I'm really happy with how it came out, so I'm ready to move on, paint it, gild it and get it all finished. But before I do any of that, I've got to clean the back of the glass. Now, anyone who's asked me in the past about what I use to clean glass, I will recommend this stuff. It's absolutely brilliant. And you basically get a sponge, wet it, rub this on, and it's sort of a bit like cake bonhomie. But I'm not going to use that on here, and the reason being is because the glue chip glass is much more difficult when you're kind of buffering it. So with stuff like that, you'd rub the powdered stuff on, wait for it to set a bit, and then rub it, sort of, you know, polish it with a tissue until all of that white powder's gone, and sort of polish the glass. It's not as straightforward as that on glass that's been glue chipped, because there's all little snags and sort of crevices and things like that that can get into, and it's just going to be really difficult to polish that. So what I'm going to use instead is a kind of really good quality glass cleaner. Just saturate that and just wipe it with a bit of kitchen towel. It doesn't matter if the kitchen towel kind of, you know, starts flaking, that'll all blow away once it's dry, and then if it doesn't, it will certainly come off when you use the kind of gilder's mop to apply the sides. So just going to cover this. You can see some of those little bits here, but again, it doesn't matter. They'll just blow away once that's dry. I'm going to change up the kitchen roll a fair bit just because I don't want streaks, so I always want to kind of finish up with a dry bit of kitchen roll. And that's that. Now all I'm going to do is one more step before I start gilding. In this little area here, because I've got etched glass, I don't want to gild that because it would just be quite muted. So I'm just going to apply some clear gloss enamel to this sort of border around the centre circle. Wait for that to dry, and then I'm going to start gilding using 23 karat gold first. I'll do certain areas and then moving on to 12 karat white gold to finish it up. Right, so now I'm going to get started with applying the gold leaf. So if you're familiar with my videos and have seen any of my gilding tutorials, you might want to skip this chapter because I'm going to go over the equipment that I've used, and I have been over that before in previous chapters or in previous videos. So firstly, obviously is the gold leaf. I'm using 23 karat gold. It's just the standard loose leaf, and you have to make sure you get loose and not transfer. I've got gilder's cushion, gilder's knife, and a squirrel hair gilder's tip. Now, important to know about the gilder's knife is don't ever touch this. If you do, you're going to need to wash it properly and make sure that you get any sort of residue from your skin off it, because as soon as you touch gold leaf with any oils from your skin, it will stick to it. Some petroleum jelly, that I'm just going to rub really fine on the back of my hand, because then you kind of just gently do that and then you can pick your gold leaf up with it. My size mix, which I keep over here away from the leaf, because if you spill water on it, you're going to ruin that gold leaf, is distilled water and leaf gelatin or sheet gelatin. So this is what it looks like. It comes in diamonds, and the mix I use will be 1 pint of distilled water to 4 of these diamonds of gelatin. Now I don't need a lot, so I'm now doing half of that mix. I'm doing half a pint with 2 diamonds. And you'll need a gilder's mop, and that is to apply the size so that the gold will stick. So I've just put 2 diamonds in there and left it soaking for 5 minutes. I'm now going to heat that in the microwave. Just keep an eye on it, you don't want it to boil. So I'll probably start with 2 minutes, maybe go up to 2.5 minutes. Just keep feeding it, because if you boil, you can kind of ruin the structure of the gelatin, and the size mix isn't as nice. You might get cloudy areas and stuff like that. So I'm going to do that now, and then switch the camera angle and start gilding. Right, so the size is heated, and the first thing I'm going to want to do is really stir that up. You know, don't assume that gelatin is just going to dissolve in there. You want to give that a really good stir, and keeping that away from the gold as well. Okay, now I'm going to put a tiny bit of petroleum jelly on the back of my hand, and I mean, you know, don't scoop it out, just a tiny little bit to moisten your finger, and rub it on the back of your hand really good. You know, you don't want to get this on the bristles of here, where it just is to coat it really, but you don't want clumps of it on because the gold will stick to it. So, pop that away. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in these kind of rings around the edges of the scroll. They're going to be gold. All of the letters are going to be gold here, and this sort of circle border is going to be gold as well. So because you apply the size and it runs down, you want to be starting at the top. So I'm going to start with these round to about here, and the same that side. Then do all the letters, and then do the bottom of this, and then move on to the circle. So I'll get started by just chopping up the leaf, and then I'll move the camera angle so that you can see the leaf being applied. Now, this is extremely delicate stuff, and got a sheet of gold leaf. I'll tap that edge down. No. I want to just lay this flat onto the cushion. The best way to do that is like that. To get the creases out, just give it a very gentle blow. Pop that here for now. Oop. And start chopping this up into little bits. Yeah, that's good. Now, being careful not to breathe on this or make any sort of sudden movements. I'm just gently brushing that over the back of my hand, making sure that none of the bristles are sticking out, because I've got to grab these individually. So I'm going to smoothen these in. This is quite an old tip. When you get them new, they're all very neat, but let's start pulling some of them out. That's about right. So that's good. Then if I just place that on a bit of the leaf, see, and just pick that up then, that's ready to be put on. So really thick on there. You don't want to be sort of wiping the side of your brush. Stick that on as runny as you can get it. And right, I'll just do a bit that hopefully the camera can see. If you see, I don't know how well that picked that up, but that just jumps off the tip and onto the surface of the glass. And then when that's on there, you can take a bit of cotton wool and just gently push that in. Being careful to check it, because if that gets wet, that'll suddenly just start pulling your gold away. But I'm going to kind of help this on its way into those chipped areas. So now I'm just going to do a time lapse of the rest of the gilding process for the 23 karat gold, then go on to how to back that up, ready to rub away the excess and to start doing the 12 karat white gold. Okay, so this is the first coat of gold leaf and it looks pretty good, but it definitely needs a second because you have to burnish it, get rid of all the loose bits and then apply another coat of gold. And although it looks alright from there, if I just get a light and shine that from behind it, you'll soon see all these gaps in here and the fact that it's a little bit translucent. You know, it's ever so fine, that leaf. So what we want to do is, yeah, rub away all of the excess gold. So what I use for that, ordinarily you can use cotton wool, and I have done in the past and it works fine, but I'm just going to introduce you to something that I do use a lot, which is brilliant. I haven't used it in the videos so far just because not everyone's got them and I wanted everyone to kind of be able to get the tools from local shops where possible. But this burnishing tool is lovely, from the Goldfather. He's based in Chicago, but he does ship to the UK. So it's just really soft and sort of padded. You can just rub that in circles. I'm not sure how well that's showing up on there, but that already looks 10 times better than this. You can see all the kind of creases on this. Again, let me just get a torch on there. So yeah, if you look, these are the two that I've just burnished, and the ones that I haven't have still got kind of the imperfections and stuff like that. You can't see the chip coming through. So yeah, and that'll really show up on the other side as well, because all of these little folds are visible on the other side of the glass as well. So you kind of want to just really rub them away. And it is a little bit tough on glue chipped glass because there's the rough element to it. So, you know, rubbing this, you're going to take away more than you would, say, for example, if you're burnishing acid etched glass or just plate glass. But that doesn't matter. You know, it's all part of the process, and you can kind of then just apply another layer of gold. So I'm going to finish up burnishing this. I won't do a time lapse of doing the other layer of gold because it will pretty much mimic what I've just done with the first application. But then I'll come back and then I'm going to back up the gold ready for kind of rubbing away the excess off the back of the panel as well. Okay. Right, I've applied the second layer of gold leaf, so I'm now ready to back it up. For anyone who's ever done glue chipping before and gilding, you might have had the horrific experience that I've had, which is thinking you're just going to paint on a load of black enamel and that'll be that. And then you turn it over and see that black has seeped into loads of tiny little cracks that your gold leaf can't get into because, you know, it's just the sort of randomness of the fractures of the glass. Now, that's happened to me once and it's never going to happen again. And the way I combat that is by backing up with clear gloss enamel. So any of those tiny little holes that the gold leaf can't get into now be filled with something clear and glossy so you can't see it at all. You can then always look afterwards and see if there's any light getting through to sort of patch up anything gold, but this is the best way to do it to make sure that the kind of gold is sealed and then you don't have to worry about it coming off. So I'll just switch the camera angle now and get started on backing it up, but it's not a complicated process. It's really just kind of going over the areas you want to keep with the enamel and a sort of fine brush. So I'll just do it as a quick time lapse. Okay, so this has been sat overnight, not because it needed to be sat overnight, but I was at work today. But you do want to leave this for an extra long time, I suppose, just to make sure that enamel that we've coated it with is 100% set. So all I'm going to do now with a sort of wet wipe, I'm using like kitchen wipe, but you can use the ones for your hands and stuff like that, is sort of go around the edges of this and start rubbing away the bits that I don't want the gold to be on. So it's really easy, and I'd try and avoid the areas that you have coated with enamel just in case, but you know, it doesn't matter if you go over them like that, because you know the enamel is much harder than how the gold is set onto the etched glass, which just rubs off quite easily. So this is how I go about doing this, but you can do it with a toothbrush, you can do it with a scouring pad and water. Yeah, numerous ways, but I've just found this way is a little bit sort of easier and quite accurate because you're just using your fingertip as well. Where you've got things like this, that's where the sort of residue from the glue or the bits that I didn't quite get off chipped into there, and you can get them off, but it might be that after you've sort of gone around the whole thing, you might need to just get a toothbrush for some extra bits. If there is a little chip in there that a bit of gold's got in, you might just be worth getting a toothbrush in and scrubbing it out. So that's it really. I'm just going to do that over the whole thing, then move on to the next stage. Right, so this is starting to take shape now. Next step is to apply the 12 carat white gold leaf. And because I've got such a massive area to cover, I'm not planning on doing that with just this, because it would take forever. I'm going to use this because there are some small bits up here where I don't want to be applying whole leaves, but what I've got is two options and I'll show you what they both are. First one is this, which is the Smith tip. This was manufactured or designed and manufactured by Dave Smith, and I got this off him and got a message inside the box which says, "Happy Gilding Paul, keep the craft alive, Dave." And I think I am keeping the craft alive, so that's really nice to have in there. But anyway, so the Smith tip, I don't think it's available anymore, but if you can find one second hand, buy one. They're really good. I've had this for, well, I can't remember, since 2015. Needs a little bit of a tidy up, but it's absolutely brilliant. You just do exactly the same, rub it on the back of your hand very gently when you've got some petroleum jelly on there, and then you can just pick up entire leaves out the book and apply them on there. So I don't know, I think it's horsehair or something, but either way, really good quality, really well made. So if you can get hold of one, definitely do. The other thing, which is much more widely available, is the thorn tip. And how this works is it's a bit of card, do the same things, rub it across the back of your hand. And this mesh you use again to just pick up leaves straight out of the book. And the reason the thorn tip's really good is because you've got that kind of visible guide, because you can sort of see through where you need to place the leaf. So I'm just going to lay a leaf with both tips so I can show you how it goes on. But I'm not going to go into too much detail after that, because really the process is the same as what I did with the gold. It's lay it on, press it in with the cotton wool, burnish it, lay it on again, and then back it up with the clear enamel. So I'll just lay a couple of whole leaves so you can see how this works. So let's get some size on there. And we'll start with the thorn tip. Just press that on, look at that, it's so easy. And bring that over here. And that just goes on as easy as that. Such a good tool, and it's so easy to use. Then I'll do one with the Smith tip as well, which is equally as easy to use. When Dave Smith first kind of put it out there, he was showing videos of his really young daughter using it. So it is certainly extremely easy to use. Right, do that over this side. So I've got the leaf on here. With my shaky hands, I say it's easy to use, but I am the worst when it comes to shaking. There you go. Just two really easy ways to apply whole gold leaves. So go back to the time lapse, get this all done, and then by the time I'm done with the time lapse stuff, I'll get ready to do the painting on the scroll and the painting in these letters. Right, so all the gilding's done, so it's pretty much a home straight now. It's taken 2 weeks, not 2 weeks of solid work because I've got a full-time job, but I've been working on it in the evenings and at weekends. So that's a kind of indication of how long something like that would take if you've got a full-time job and are doing it as a hobby, I suppose. In terms of materials, I've used 3 books of 12 carat white gold leaf and 1 book of 23 carat gold. Yeah, well, a bit shy of 1 book, to be honest. But what I'm going to do now is do a nice brush blend across this top scroll here. So I've put some red into a pot. I always do my mixing in a kind of little pot rather than on a plate, and that means the paint doesn't go tacky and go off, and you can mix it and you get a bit more time to do it. So what I'm going to do is start with this rich red colour. I'm going to start in the middle. Because this is a scroll, it's going to be catching the light on the front and then gradually getting darker, and then maybe a slight little gradient into a little bit lighter up here. So I'm going to start with a stripe down the middle. I'm going to be mixing that with this standard red, which is more of a kind of maroon, so it's like a deep red. And I've got black just in case I get sort of down to here and I think I could start sort of making that really dark. So I want it to be a noticeable gradient coming from the middle. If I start this off on camera rather than on time lapse, just to show the first couple of strokes and how I'd mix it in and what ratio, I'll then switch to a time lapse so that you don't have to just sit through the boring stages of me dipping in paint and mixing and dipping and mixing. So I'll do that now and get the first stroke started. So following the line from the centre here, it's going to be around about where that S is. And it doesn't matter if I paint over this because I'll back this up with the clear gloss enamel. So start. And it also doesn't matter so much about how neat you are with this, you know, it's going to be a very gradual gradient. So yeah, it's not going to be, these aren't going to be uniform lines. So it's going to start there. Luckily, because this has got a symmetrical design, I can use that to my advantage, where I can see that the tip of this little part of the design there and then lining up with this bit here. So that's the first strip, and then all I use is, I'll put this on here, is these little pipettes. They're ever so handy for just getting tiny little bits and putting things in a drop at a time. So take a drop of that, pop that in here. Something like that should be fine. And I'm just going to kind of mix this in. And like I say, because this is such a deep amount of the paint, that's not going to suddenly go all tacky and go off and then be difficult to kind of mix. If you haven't got a pot and you do it on a plate, it's worth just having some paint thinner at hand, because it does go tacky quite quickly. You can see ever so slight change, and that's all I want. I want it to be so slight that, you know, you're not going to notice it when it's painted next to this line, but over the sort of course of getting to the end of this, that'll be a nice sort of gradient. So I'm going to do this on either side of the stripe that I've just done. And again, it doesn't matter if I touch the paint I've just laid. And luckily for me, because my hands are terribly shaky, it doesn't really matter how accurate you are. So let's just go again. And I'm going to carry on like that, but I'll switch it to a time lapse so you haven't just got to keep watching me mix the paint. But that's pretty much it. Like I say, go to here till it's dark, and then maybe start adding some more colour in to just pull it back a little bit. Yeah, that's it. Right, well, so much for me getting this finished on a Friday night. It's now 8:30 Saturday night and I still haven't finished it. There isn't a lot to do, so what I've done is I've backed up not backed up, I've done another coat of paint just where the scroll is, just so light doesn't come through. And then I've put one shot copper in the Havana Cigars letter. All I need to do now is spray this with a clear gloss, not enamel actually, it's a clear acrylic lacquer, and I'm going to spray that just so that will make it completely transparent so I can mount a photo in the back. So there we go, and that's it. Now all I've got to do is mount a photo behind it and the whole piece will be finished. And in terms of technical stuff, that is everything you're going to need to do. All I've got to do now is put a photo in there to finish it off, and I've got this photo of my wife from our wedding day which I'm going to put in there because I think it's a beautiful photo, it's a beautiful piece, and I think they'll go very nicely together. So I'll leave that as a finishing shot so you can see the details of the piece. So I'm going to sign out now because it's late on a Saturday night and I've got to get the video out on Sunday. So hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please subscribe to the channel and click the little thumbs up icon, and please share it with anyone else who you think might enjoy it. So till next time, cheers.